Hello and welcome back to Curiosity Mine, and welcome back as well to OpalWords, where we look at the terminology and vernacular used on the Australian opal fields, particularly at Lightning Ridge in New South Wales. We have talked a little bit about opal formation in the past on this channel, and we've touched on different shapes and forms that opal typically takes at Lightning Ridge, but we're going to dig a bit deeper into that in this video. Opal is a uniquely unique gemstone in that no two pieces are ever alike. Some of them can be similar in pattern or colour or tone, but every single piece is completely unique, and the same can be said about the way that opal forms. There are a number of common forms, but they're all completely unique. Generally speaking, there are three really common ways that opal takes shape at Lightning Ridge, with an infinite amount of less common ways. Opal formation is a pretty contentious topic, and there's a lot of very enthusiastic research happening, quite a bit of which involves conflicting ideas and wildly different scientific approaches, but certain points are largely agreed upon. The opal at Lightning Ridge formed about 100 million years ago, and it was formed when water that was saturated with silica or silicon dioxide seeped through the ground and settled into cavities in the mud or claystone. When these cavities filled up with the deposited silica, they hardened, and over a geological age, they turned into what we now have as common and precious opal. Today in this video, we're just focusing on those cavities in the mud, just the holes that the silica collected into and eventually turned into opal. The most famous and sought after type of opal at Lightning Ridge is Nobby Opal, which is found in round nodules that probably formed in air bubbles in the claystone. I spoke with Vicki at Down to Earth Opals about Nobbies, and we saw some spectacular examples of Nobby Opal.
Nobby Opal. So Nobbies are generally a round nodular formation. It's when the silica gel has filled a gas bubble or a cavity within the earth itself. So they've got this beautiful round shape. The one that I'm showing you, it's been broken in the mining process. So it's been split down the middle. Here with the Nobby, you're looking at the side view, and we've got the rich dark potch that is underneath the colour, then the precious opal layer on top of that, and you can see the blue-green bar is quite thick, so it would be a high dome stone that would get cut from this piece. So when we cut the opal from here, we would grind the top away, or where all the natural claystone is, to reveal the beautiful blue-green colour, and experience tells me that that colour will be a really broad grassy pattern going right across the face of the stone with rich blues and greens and sort of turquoise colours. We would trim the potch under there because we don't need that much. The high dome will take care of the thickness of the stone and the three-dimensional colour play. So we would trim the potch but retain enough of it on the bottom to ensure that we have that strong depth of colour. If we were to remove the potch entirely, the opal would become translucent, and then it would be less bright, and we would devalue the stone. So we always leave some potch on the back of the stone with a black opal. This one's another Nobby. It's like a big giant Nobby, and it was found in the roof of the mine, and so it was hit with the jackhammer, and you can see where it's been hit there's some sort of fractures within the colour bar. Beautiful thick potch bar and beautiful thick precious gem blue opal colour bar at the top. It goes all the way through to the back there. You can just see the colour exposed to the back, totally in its rough form, hasn't been through the agitator or anything. So to approach that piece, again, we would grind the top here off to expose the blue right across here. We'd have to lose a little bit because of those fractures, but you can see the colour bar is thick enough to cut a really nice high dome blue black opal. The next one is a lovely Nobby with a grey base. So this one, it's closed like this. We sliced it because it actually didn't indicate much opal on the outside. We were mining a claim that produced lots of colourless Nobbies, so lots of potch Nobbies, no colour. So we put the saw through it, as you do, and it revealed a beautiful red, beautiful pink red, thick colour bar on the grey potch. So when you saw Nobbies, you always saw them off centre, never straight through the middle. just in case there is opal on the inside. So we haven't lost too much. So you'll see here the bar is nice and thick. There's the potch. So we would grind the top here off and expose that beautiful red colour. And again, it would be a high domed gem quality light opal.
So nobbies form in bubbles and they're generally round in shape. Sometimes they're squashed a bit vertically and they're often shaped with a cone or a point on top. Your classic lightning ridge nobby will be roughly cone shaped, with the cone part being white common opal or potch, and it's generally referred to as a ceramic cap on top. Historically, these nobbies were referred to as Chinaman's hats because things were different in the past and we've all grown as people since then. Hi, if you enjoy these videos and you'd like to support Curiosity Mine, one of the ways you can do that is through Patreon. Patreon allows you to contribute a small amount monthly to help keep this channel running, and in return you get to feel like an amazing person and you get your name on this list of supporters along with these awesome people. If you'd like to sign up and help the channel, the link is in the description and your support is greatly appreciated. But now let's get back to your scheduled programming. The other common formation of opal at Lightning Ridge is seam opal.
Opal also forms in seams in the cracks of the earth. So this one you can see we've actually already started to process this piece. It's quite a thick bar of colour in blue-green, and it sort of changes on the other side. Nice thick potch that will cut a beautiful opal. In seam opal the stones can be quite big because the silica gel has filled quite a large area of space in that earth. And this one also seam opal, much thinner bar, but it does have some blue in there and black potch on both sides. So when the cutter is cutting a piece like that, you really have to know and judge which side will be the face of the stone. Generally speaking, you would rub down the clay area. It's a nice piece of seam.
You'll sometimes hear people asking or debating about what's better, Nobby opal or seam opal, and the thing is, it's all opal. It's all made of the same stuff. It's just the mold that it's cast in that's different. However, there are a couple of factors that affect the value, or at least the perceived value, of certain types of opal. Seam opal can form in very thin sheets, so thin that they can't be cut or polished or even separated from the host rock. This is an example, not a great example, I will admit, but an example of Painted Lady, which is an incredibly thin sheet of seam opal attached to the outside of a piece of sandstone. It can't be removed from the rock because it's too thin, and it can't be cut because it has no backing and it has no structural integrity. Often this stuff just gets polished in situ and it becomes an ornamental piece, particularly if there's a kind of landscape or something in the opal pattern. So very thin seam opal is not desirable, and because seam opal can form in very large sheets that are very, very thin, it can mean that entire deposits of seam opal might not hold much value at all. The second thing affecting seam opal is a bit of an economic blip that happened a couple of decades ago. Back in around the year 2000, there was an opal rush at one of the Grawin opal fields where a tremendous amount of seam opal was found and mined out really quickly by enthusiastic opal miners. While it was obviously a fantastic thing for the miners, it created a bit of an oversupply situation and it kind of drowned the industry in seam opal for quite some time. The oversupply and under demand for seam opal meant that its value and saleability dropped considerably, and the unfortunate fact that a small amount of the seam opal that was found was, shall we say, less stable meant that it was really hard to sell seam opal at a good price for a good many years after that. Unfortunately, that stigma is still there, but it's largely unwarranted now, as it's been many, many years since the market was oversaturated with seam opal. And if we're honest, there's always a risk of opal being unstable. Seam is not particularly susceptible to it over Nobby opal. It's just luck of the draw. It just happened to coincide with that same economic situation that was happening back in 2000-ish. So there's nothing wrong with seam opal, it's just opal formed in a different shape to Nobby opal. If anything, seam opal is actually more likely to give you a large and visually interesting stone. It's just less likely to be high domed like a Nobby would. Also, while we're on the subject of seam opal, ideally you want your seam opal to form horizontally, this way. So the sheets are big and the sheets are flat. Opal bars form horizontally, so parallel to the horizon, just like water level. So if seam forms this way, you get potch on the bottom and colour on the top, and you've got a good chance of cutting a nice stone from it. What you don't want is seam that forms vertically this way, because you'll end up with potch, 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 a tiny bar of colour, and then potch, 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 potch. And you probably won't be able to cut anything from it. Seam that forms this way is called vertical. They're up all night coming up with that one. And it's not really desirable at all. It's worth remembering as well that this stuff formed 100 million years ago. So what's horizontal now might have been vertical when it was born. So just because you find something that's laying this way now, it'll be no guarantee that it wasn't created this way. I mentioned earlier that there are 3 common formations or shapes that opal takes at Lightning Ridge, Nobbies and seam being 2 of them. The third one is a form that we've looked at quite a bit on this channel, and that's fossils. Fossils form when biological matter gets buried in the claystone and disintegrates, leaving a cavity that fills with silica-rich liquid, forming opal in much the same way as a knobby or a piece of seam opal. Fossils can be formed from plant material or animal material, and everything from a tiny snail all the way up to huge dinosaur bones. If you'd like to learn more about opalized fossils at Lightning Ridge, check out this playlist of videos. So those are the 3 most common forms that opal takes at Lightning Ridge. There are many others, and we've looked at some of the weirder forms that opal can take back in this video with Dr. Elizabeth Smith about things that are sometimes confused for opalized fossils. And I am sure that we will look at more weird opal formations in the future as well. This video was made with the help of down-to-earth opals at Lightning Ridge, with special thanks to Vicki. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Curiosity Mine on YouTube, sharing the video with your friends, following along on social media, and maybe even supporting Curiosity Mine on Patreon. The links are all in the description. And thank you for watching.